Thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon, directors and commission members and staff. So as this meeting gets underway, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. My name is James Warren, and as the Corporate Legislative Officer, I will call this inaugural meeting of the Sewage Commission to order. Thank you to everybody for attending today. The first order of business at inaugural meetings is to conduct the election of the chair and vice chair. I will begin by calling for nominations for the position of chair. And sorry, I should just confirm that in the civic room today, we have Director Grant, Director Swift, and Director Hillian in attendance. And online we have Directors Will Cole Hamilton, Director Morin, and Director McGowan on the Zoom call. And we do not have a representative from CFB Comox today. So with the first order of business being the conduct of the election of the chair and vice chair, I will begin by calling for nominations for the position of chair. Any director may put forward another director's name, and each time a director is nominated, Lisa will note his or her last name. I will call for nominations 3 times, and at the close of the nominations, I will ask each nominee in reverse order from which they were nominated if they will let their name stand for election. If more than one director is nominated, then each candidate will have 3 minutes to make a campaign presentation. Following the speeches, we will conduct the election by way of secret ballot here at the civic room, and I would ask those on the call if they could text me, and I will provide you my number for texting if an election is required. When all of the votes are submitted, Russell Dyson and myself as statutory officers will count the ballots, and I will then announce the results. If there are more than 2 candidates and no candidate receives a clear majority of votes on the first ballot, the candidate with the lowest number of votes will be removed from the ballot and the voting will be conducted again. This process will be used until there is 1 candidate who receives a clear majority of ballots cast. If there are 2 tie votes, the commission will have to pass a resolution to either determine the election of chair by the drawing of lots or to start the process over. The process for the election of the vice chair is the same as I've just described. However, candidates will be allowed just 2 minutes for their speech. Are there any questions at this stage? Seeing none, I'll open the floor to, I see Director Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, James. My hand was actually up to make a nomination.
Okay, well, I'll open the floor to nominations for the position of chair. Director Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Director Hillian.
Director Hillian, thank you. Great, thanks. I'll call a second time for any nominations for chair. And we'll call a third and final time for any nominations for position of chair. And Director Hillian, do you allow your name to stand for election of chair?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I'm pleased to announce that Director Hillian, you are chair of the Sewage Commission for 2022. And I'll open the floor to nominations for position of vice chair. Director Grant.
All right, I would nominate Director Swift.
Thank you, Director Swift. And I'll call for a second time for nominations for position of vice chair. And call a third and final time for nominations for vice chair. Seeing no further nominations, Director Swift, do you allow your name to stand for vice chair?
I do.
Great, thanks very much. And then please announce that you are claimed as vice chair of the Sewage Commission for 2022. And so with that, I will turn the floor over to Chair Hillian.
Well, thank you very much, fellow directors and commission members. Congratulations to Director Swift, who will be my pleasure to work with again. I was saying to Directors Grant and Swift before the meeting started that if I was nominated and acclaimed, I would accept acclamation as a show of support rather than an acknowledgement that nobody else wanted to do the job. So, but with that, I will certainly strive to maintain the standards demonstrated by the chair from the past year, and look forward to working with you all in that regard. And with that, we will move into the rest of our agenda with thanks to James Warren for starting off the meeting today. And we have the management reports, and I'll take a motion for receipt, please. Moved by Grant, second by Swift. Any questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, is there anyone opposed? That is carried. We will move on to the management report from the Comox Valley Sewage Advisory Committee and a motion for receipt. Moved Grant, seconded Swift. Any questions or comments? This is for the meeting of February 1st. All right, I'm advised by staff we can do both. I'll take the motion as a motion for both receipt of February 1st and February 8th. And is there anyone opposed? Those are both carried. Moving on, we have the sewer system conveyance project scope confirmation decisions. And we have a presentation for receipt. Moved by Grant, seconded by Swift. Over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. And Chris LaRose will present this report along with support from others. And just wish to express to the Sewage Commission how exciting it is to be at this point in this project. You will be provided with the scope with respect to various components to review and consider. We welcome your questions and comments, as this is a critical moment as we move on in terms of delivering this project for you. So, Chris LaRose.
Thank you, Russell. And through the chair, good afternoon, everyone. So almost exactly a year after the Sewage Commission approved the preferred conveyance solution last February, we're back in front of you today with scope finalization recommendation for the portion of the project that will be delivered by a design build contract. So you'll recall from our subsequent April 2021 conveyance project implementation strategy report that the town of Comox crossing will be delivered separately via a design bid build project delivery method. So just thought I'd start off with just a very brief bit of context, what we've been up to over the past year, actually just a little bit before that actually. So in June of 2018, our liquid waste management planning process was initiated. In October of 2020, after 11 meetings, the liquid waste management plan TAC and PAC, the technical and public advisory committees, recommended the preferred conveyance solution. As I just mentioned, in February of 2021, the Sewage Commission approved the preferred conveyance solution. In April of that year, the implementation strategy. In June, we hired HDR as our owner's engineer for the design build component of the conveyance project. And then in July, we undertook or completed a successful AAP process for borrowing related to funding of the project. Between July and January, we undertook, under HDR's strong guidance, the DB scope assessment. So these were further assessments that have been highlighted through the liquid waste management planning process as pieces of work that needed to be done before we finalized the scope in time for procurement. From December of last year, 21 until now and ongoing is the procurement process for this design build component. So we issued the request for qualifications recently, and we're preparing to shortlist the respondents from that, and then preparing to release the RFP in early spring. So as you know, our manager of capital projects for water and wastewater is on a paternity leave, Charlie Gore. So to help fill the gap left by Charlie's absence, we temporarily elevated Zoe Berkey. Zoe has been leading a number of capital projects for the Water and Wastewater Department and is assisting the external project manager hired to keep the conveyance project on track while Charlie's away. So John Esty is the Director of Infrastructure Services for Western Canada for Collier's project leaders. He's been engaged to help us with this project. John's developed a presentation to help guide you through all of those completed assessments that I mentioned. and the rationale for each of the scope recommendations we're bringing to you today. So an acknowledgement of the significant kind of volume of material and the complexity. John will be walking you through each of the scope recommendations kind of methodically, and then stopping after each key component to encourage some dialogue or questions before moving on to the next item. I'll step in at a couple spots to summarize the pieces that I've personally been leading. But for now, let's over to John. So over to you, John.
Excuse me, Chris, just before you proceed, I just want to acknowledge that Director Hamir, the Director for Area B, is on the call as a non-voting guest of the Sewage Commission, along with other staff members. I wanted to make sure that any members of the public watching were aware of that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm trying to share my screen and I get a message saying the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So if the host could.
Looks like that's just
that.
been sorted out for you, John.
Okay, I'll try it again here. Okay, so if you just bear with me. I presume you're seeing the slideshow.
Yes,
Yeah,
we see
good.
the introductory slide. Thanks.
Okay, very good. So good afternoon, everyone. Yes, as Chris mentioned, I'm John Esty with Collier's Project Leaders, and I'm assisting the CVRD in managing the sewer conveyance project. As you all know, a great deal of planning legwork has gone into this project, and it's now at the point where we have a clearly defined scope and an updated cost estimate, and are excited to move forward. It's a large, high-profile project that impacts all citizens and a variety of local stakeholders across multiple jurisdictions. And we'd really like to encourage dialogue throughout. So after each slide, I'll invite discussion, questions. Please feel free to interrupt and ask whatever you need to ask at any time during the presentation. And where I'm unable to provide an intelligent answer, I'll certainly draw on Chris or Zoe or our other team members. So let's dive in. So first, let's get reacquainted with the project alignment and the physical components of the project. So I'm going to fire up my virtual laser pointer. Here we go. And so at our project limits, we have at the west end, the Courtney Pump Station down here by the Huhusum site, and the wastewater treatment way up here at the other end. In pale blue, we have our existing sanitary main, the one that's at risk in the intertidal area, and the reason we need to move the conveyance system inland. So our new alignment is represented by this, what I would call puce colored line, which represents cut and cover installation. So all through here. And the orange line is actually the 1.3 kilometer tunneled section. So this project, as you know, is being delivered using two different approaches, more or less in tandem. Design build outside of the town of Comox limits, and then traditional design bid build within the town limits, except for the Jane Place pump station, which will actually be part of the design build contract as well. So the new pipe is large diameter HDPE that's fused together and carries the sewage under pressure most of the way. So I'm going to quickly run us through the alignment here, just to get us all oriented. At the west end, we're building a new resilient pump station somewhere on the north side of Comox Road. I'll get into that a bit further. We then head east and shift over to Farmview Road and through agricultural land to avoid a known archaeological site. And then back onto Comox Road through the Comox First Nation, where we'll be upgrading the pump station there as well. And then we proceed over Comox Hill into the town. Again, all of this is cut and cover, trenching, and run along Beaufort Avenue, upgrade the pump station at Jane Place, and proceed over to Balmoral Avenue. And then at the Torrance Balmoral Lazo intersection, we begin our tunneled HDD installation through Lazo Hill. Then we carry on up to Moorland Road when we come out of the ground again, and or out of the HDD, and then we proceed up Moorland using cut and cover again, cross the Lazo Marsh, and then tie in at the sewage plant. So 7.5 to 8 kilometers of conveyance from end to end. I just gotta move something on my screen here. Okay, and next slide. If I can get my mouse working. Okay. So today we're speaking primarily about the confirmation of the design build scope. You've been provided a report and attachments summarizing the studies and previous reports brought forward in camera to the Sewage Commission. And it's basically everything that's gotten us to this stage. I'm going to present at a high level the key scope development components, predicted costs, and the next steps. Outstanding studies include the final siting of the Courtney Pump Station north of Comox Road and optimizing the Lazo Marsh crossing. Given the timing, we don't plan to come back to the Sewage Commission for approval to finalize these remaining 2 items unless circumstances push us in a very different direction than anticipated. I'll note that the design build scope is still being negotiated with the town of Comox, but we figure it should be crystallized via a project agreement in March or April. Okay. So this information was presented previously, but to recap, the existing pump station was built in 1982, and considerable modifications would be required to increase its hydraulic capacity. This would include complete replacement of the mechanical, electrical, and ventilation systems. A new pump station with its greater pump selection options facilitates more consistent flow and reduced energy consumption. As well, a new station built to current codes will have less maintenance cost, and it can be designed with future expansion in mind. The existing station would actually need to be replaced anyway to accommodate future flows beyond 2060. The existing station as well would require significant floodproofing works, whereas a new station is essentially floodproof by raising its elevation, putting it on higher ground. Another issue is seismic resiliency. The ground around the existing station is prone to liquefaction, and significant and potentially risky ground improvements would be required. And even then, there's no guarantee that the station wouldn't still be vulnerable. So, considering costs, risks, and operating factors, it was determined that building a new Courtney pump station instead of retrofitting the existing facility is actually the best course of action. So I'll take a quick pause here to see if there's any questions at this point. And I can't see everybody, so if somebody's raising a hand,
I can let you know, John, and there's no questions at this point, so feel free to carry on.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so a new piece of information that the report contains is the Courtney Pump Station siting memo, which is a qualitative study that considers the pros and cons of, well, as you see here, 4 potential locations for construction of the new facility. Essentially, seismic, climate resiliency, and land availability considerations lead to the conclusion that the new pump station needs to be installed north of Comox Road. So C or D potentially. The team is presently working with our property agent and the landowner on the particulars, and we're also completing a geotechnical assessment to determine the required setback from the river and what the ground improvement options are. The nearer to the river, the more extensive the requirement for ground improvements. So really beyond 300 meters from the river's edge is the distance where soil stability is such that improvements really shouldn't be required. So that's really the kind of the sweet spot where cost savings can be realized. Another consideration, though, is that the new station needs to be somewhat close to the old one just to allow connection to the city system. The farther away, the need for the new station to be deeper and incoming lines are to be deeper. So there's a challenge there. So the farther away it is, higher the cost. And at a certain point, it's just no longer viable to go deeper. So we have to find that sweet spot, I suppose. As the area north of Comox Road is an agricultural reserve, an ALC application and agreement with the private property owners are required, and that's progressing. Any pause for questions here? No. Okay.
John,
So at this,
John, I'll just ask, I don't imagine this is going to happen, but just to cover all the bases, what would be our fallback if for some reason the Agricultural Land Commission or the landowner were not in agreement?
yeah, Chris, do you want to speak to that
Sure.
a bit?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks for the question. At this point, we're optimistic. We've advanced negotiations with the property owner, and we feel like we're heading in the right direction. And we do have positive indication about the ALC process. That being said, as a contingency plan, as John has highlighted, we have assessed these 4 locations. The preference, from a risk and cost perspective, would be to move beyond that 300 meters from the river to avoid the additional cost of ground improvements and then the residual risk that a seismic event occurs and that the risks aren't fully mitigated. That being said, if that's just off the table from a permitting perspective, then we'll focus in on a location on the south side of Comox Road. At this point, as I mentioned, we're feeling quite optimistic that we can navigate these negotiations and the permitting processes and place the facility in its best long-term location.
Thanks very much. And just to confirm an earlier point, I believe it was indicated that the new pump station would have twice the life of the existing one, such that it would extend beyond 2060. Did I hear that correctly?
Sure, I can speak to that one as well. Yeah. So what was meant there is that just to highlight that if we were to retrofit the existing facility, we would still be working with a structure that was 40 years old. So floodproofing and seismic risk aside, the actual remaining life of that facility, it is approximately halfway through its lifespan. Whereas building a new facility, it's starting fresh, modern seismic code, and just new concrete and tankage. So that what was meant there. In terms of total life expectancy for the old facility versus the new one, from day one, maybe not all that different, but it's more just reflective of the fact that a retrofit would be sinking money, effectively the same amount of money into a facility that's already halfway through its lifespan.
Thanks for that. And we have a question from Director Grant.
Thank you. I just, I may have missed it when you said it, but I was just wondering about odor control. I just wanted to confirm that the new pump station would have odor control, because I'm fairly certain the old one didn't. So I assume we're going to do that, but I just wanted to be sure.
Did you want to take that, Chris, or?
Yeah, sure. So that's definitely an assessment that's underway with HDR. We definitely don't want this facility to be any more of a presence, hopefully even less of a presence than the existing station. So the exact form of that odor control is being determined now as we work through the statement of requirements for the project. But we are definitely intent on reducing, if possible, the presence of that facility.
Thanks very much. If you want to carry on.
Okay. Actually, Chris, I think you.
Thanks, John. I'll take this one. So after leaving the Courtney pump station, the force main will head east along Comox Road, following the alignment of the existing pipe, except at a different place in the roadway. So the original alignment would have followed Comox Road all the way to and then through KFN IR1, but after significant assessment with Dr. Jesse Morin, the KFN's preferred archaeologist and baseline archaeological services, it became clear that the section of Comox Road from roughly Rotary Park through to Bayside Drive within IR1 have a very high likelihood of encountering significant previously undisturbed archaeological material. So the alternative route that we first assessed and we're now recommending to the Sewage Commission is to leave Comox Road just past Rotary Park and then head east on Farm View Road before cutting back into the agricultural fields parallel to Comox Road. After which it would then run down the west boundary of IR1 and then return to Comox Road. So not only would this alignment significantly reduce the disturbance of sensitive archaeological deposits, it will also result in a much lower traffic impact to the public by eliminating well over a kilometer of traffic impacts through that area. So the CBRD's property agent has reached out to the owners of each of those agricultural lots and has started the process towards securing statutory right-of-ways across those properties. There's about 6 of them. And just as John mentioned with the Courtney Pump Station location, an agricultural land commission permit is required prior to those SRWs being granted and registered. Maybe the next slide, John.
Excuse me, we do have a question and we'll recognize Director Cole Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Chris, I just had a question. It looks like the, as you showed it, that until the line reaches the Rotary Lookout, it's sort of beside or beneath the road. Is there a reason that in terms of archaeological sites that why don't you only begin going inland at this point rather than further up?
Yeah, absolutely. So this map that John has up here, you can see the red polygon, so like the red shaded area. So obviously the entire estuary is highlighted given the presence of the fish weirs and the numerous other archaeological discoveries in that area. But if you look closer in at the section of Comox Road, from just past where we plan to leave at Comox Road all the way past the Gas and Go, or actually towards the Gas and Go, there's a separate polygon there, and that's reflective of past discoveries in this area that have been registered on the provincial database. And we understand from that work with Dr. Morin and Baseline that the true extent is actually quite a bit larger than that. So just that there hasn't necessarily been the discoveries in those areas that have been tracked and registered in the provincial database. So whereas for that section from the Courtney Pump Station down to where we would turn up Farm View Road, there's been nothing. There's nothing showing up on that provincial database, and actually we're quite fortunate to have had the City of Courtney install or replace their water line along much of this alignment. I think 2018 that was done. So there's quite a bit of information that was generated by that project that has been a key input to kind of this analysis into this alternate route.
Okay, thank you. I was curious as to how we knew that was relatively clear of remains, but it sounds like Courtney's work has given us a sense of that. Great, thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Director Grant.
So I was wondering if you have any indication of how things are going on the land acquisition or right-of-way issues, and if we're having any difficulty with anybody, or there's usually a holdout or two when you get doing these things. I'm just wondering how that's going.
Sure. So there's 2 areas that we're negotiating for SRWs, or that we will be. And those are the agricultural land we're covering here, and then the in the Lazo Hill area. So in both cases, it's fairly early days, negotiating consent agreements with each of the property owners as a first step, to free us up in the ability to enter onto the sites and do surveys, that type of thing. The actual terms of the SRW are being developed, and those negotiations will start relatively soon. And they're being led by our properties agent, Jim Richards. So at this point, it's a little too early to provide that report.
And we have a question from Director Swift.
Thanks, Chair. My question, Chris, is for those property owners along the Dike Road there. Could you speak to, it's going to be cut and cover, so could you just elaborate what kind of disruption they might experience on their property?
And so just to clarify, are we talking about the agricultural properties that the line will cut across? Or the properties fronting?
I guess the property, I mean, I'm those ones, yeah. The private property, I think.
Right, yeah. So the pipeline project, is going to be a fairly large operation, but so a fairly, quite a few pieces of equipment and men and enclosures to all that local traffic, but along that section of Farm View. But it on the plus side, it will move fairly quickly. So for any given location, 2 or 3 weeks would be the extent of disruption. Yeah, like the full intensity of disruption. So we'll be working. We, as well as the contractor, will be working very closely with the property owners to minimize, just any disruption to their schedules.
Thanks. So you can carry on.
Sure. So a separate but similar analysis was completed for the IR1 crossing, but instead of a separate alignment, we were assessing the viability of using horizontal directional drilling to go under the historic village site through to Bayside Road. So that analysis confirmed that cut and cover along the Ministry Road right-of-way was still the best way to cross IR1, partly because surface excavation would still be required to convey wastewater from the KFN pump station back to the new Courtney pump station. So you can see that bright green line that John has on the map here. So that and that's running in parallel with the darker line. So the reality is that this new line will be significantly higher pressure because we're going up, up to a much higher elevation through that over Comox Hill and Lazo Hill, even with the use of horizontal directional drilling. So that pump station at the KFN was not built to overcome line pressures of that magnitude. So our options there were to replace it with a pump station that big enough or powerful enough to overcome that higher pressure, or to continue using that pump station and pump the wastewater back to the Courtney pump station. So for a range of reasons, including cost, disruption to the KFN, and also mitigating the risk of a catastrophic failure of a piece of equipment at that pump station with a much higher pressure force main. If that were to occur, there'd be a bigger impact. And that pump station being located immediately adjacent to the band office, definitely a concern. So the decision was made to run a pipe back to the Courtney pump station. So sharing the trench with the big pipe, this would be a much smaller pipe, 8 inches versus 34 inches, to run all the way back to the Courtney pump station. So given that would require that would involve trench and cover across part of IR1 anyway, so that was kind of instrumental in settling on cut and cover through IR1. So to mitigate the archaeological risk and honoring the commitment made to the KFN in the community benefits agreement that was approved by both parties in late 2020, this section of the force main will first be pre-dug to allow for full care and attention to all archaeological materials, and also to mitigate cost and schedule risks to the pipeline project. So in other words, that trench cross section will be dug down to native materials and then replaced, and it will be done on a much smaller operation than the full pipeline project, to allow time to pause and take the necessary steps and follow the necessary protocols, and then replaced, repaved, and then the larger pipeline operation will come through with the knowledge that there is no chance of encountering archaeological material in that pipe cross section. Any questions?
Chris, are questions related to cost pertinent now, or are you covering that later?
I think we can definitely field some now. If it is more relevant or it will be addressed later, I'll highlight that.
Well, I just couldn't help noticing the wide range of cost estimates related to the archaeological protection. And I wondered if you could speak to that and in particular to the, I understand that there are different methods of handling the archaeological remains if encountered, and there's a variety of costs that relate to those different methods.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely get into that. This is the right spot for that discussion. So the table that was included in the staff report just showed the range of possible projected costs, and these were arrived at after much work with Dr. Morin and Baseline Archaeological Services to try and kind of bracket the kind of the low end and the high end of the extent of undisturbed material that could be encountered while trenching. And for example, we used a range of, based on that expertise, we established a range of between 5 and 50% of excavated material that would be considered previously undisturbed. And that was, based on, we're fortunate to have quite a bit of information in this area, but still the vast majority of the ground to be excavated, would not have been previously explored. So with that, working within that, you can imagine with that wide range, that it would deliver a pretty wide range of potential cost impacts. As to the methods used, they're pretty prescriptive. So we've made a commitment, corporate commitment, and specifically a commitment to undertake or comply with the KFN's cultural heritage policy. And so they are pretty prescriptive. So for every for all previously undisturbed archaeological material, 50% of that material is required to undergo a systematic data recovery process, where it's hand dug and screened. So 50% of that material. So you can imagine when we're talking about hundreds or thousands of cubic meters of material. So that range, and at a significant cost per cubic meter, because it's done intensively by hand, there is a very wide range of potential costs. And so when we looked at specifically at the Comox Road versus the agricultural lands, we moved far enough back from the intertidal zone that to put us largely outside of that 200-meter zone that's prescribed by the KFN CHP. But also because we understand from the expertise drawn on from Dr. Morin and Baseline that the kind of the density of archaeological materials falls away very quickly as you move away from the ocean.
So those are primarily labor costs that will fluctuate given the volume of material that is required to be assessed.
Very well put. Yes.
I don't see any further questions at this point, so feel free to carry on.
Thanks. Back over to you, John.
Okay. Okay. So I had my slide mixed up. So what you're seeing here is the horizontal directional drilled or HDD alignment that was being considered. Originally, with the yellow line indicating where the assembled pipe would have resided until it was installed in the tunnel. You'll see also there was fire up my laser pointer again. Over here was the site of an entry pit, and that was as you see, that's the St. Joe site that's currently under development by Providence Living. But further analysis and a requirement actually to move that pit because of development going on the site, analysis was carried on and a further review of the hydraulics was done, and was determined ultimately to despite having a significantly shorter run of HDD by moving the entry pit to the west, it actually wasn't the best option anymore. So leading to the cut and cover option for Comox Hill. Other considerations that led to a change from the original HDD to cut and cover included One, cut and cover is less costly than HDD. So there is a minor increase in power cost over 40 years due to the cut and cover pipe being installed at a higher elevation than the HDD pipe, but it's negligible really over the long run. So that's one reason, less cost, I should say. Also, geotechnical investigation determined that the presence of cobbles through Comox Hill makes HDD installation more challenging and riskier. Potential of the tunnel collapsing or the machine, the drill getting basically stuck, that sort of thing. So that's another reason. And the third one is a relatively shallow depth of HDD in this location. With the geotechnical conditions actually increases settlement risk at the surface. So could potentially see your roadway settling. I'll go on to say the other benefit of the cut and cover option is that it minimizes the need for property negotiations at this location. HDD would have required an entry exit pit on private property. So with the cut and cover installation, it can be entirely within the public road right of way. I'll also note that around the top of Comox Hill is the recommended location for one of two odor management structures mentioned earlier. So this is a high point in the line where it would be vented. So it makes sense that this would be a location for a odor management structure. And we say structure, but really we're looking at a small kiosk-like structure that contains the specialized equipment to do the odor management. So it's a fairly innocuous sort of structure.
John, we have a question from Director Grant.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm wondering about traffic and traffic disruptions. We just had some work done on a gas line right in that exact area, right down Comox Avenue, and they had one lane traffic, and it was only for a few days, but you could start to see the congestion problem. So I guess I'm wondering how long you see us being shut down or having it down to one lane, and is one lane traffic even feasible for that piece of road? Because you were starting to see some real disruption, and this will go on for more than a couple of days, I'm sure.
Yes. So this is a situation where there will be disruption. It is unavoidable just to the nature of the work. We're currently working or currently looking at what that disruption could be right now. I know the initial intent was to maintain one lane of traffic through there at a minimum. So currently looking at that. I don't know that we can say anything specific at this point in terms of duration, unless Chris, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, maybe just to add, thanks, John. Just to add that we'll be working closely with the contractor to communicate, to engage, inform the public, well in advance, so that there's as much advance notice as possible about the extent and duration of disruption, so that people can adjust their routine and their routes to and from town and from work. But like John mentioned, it's unavoidable that this project will have some significant impacts on traffic, and we're working hard to minimize those.
We're actually having a meeting about an hour from now with the two design teams from the design build and the design bid build projects or contracts, and to talk about that very thing, interfacing and traffic management. So it's something we are looking at and recognize the serious nature of it for sure.
Thanks. We do have a follow-up from Director Grant.
Yeah, I know that we want to do some works in some of that area in conjunction with what you guys are doing. And I think it's really paramount that we dig that road up one time, not once and then back again. And then, the disruption will be really difficult on our people. And I think that that's a pretty key component for us, that we get that organized and do it all together. So just state that for you.
Thanks, Director Grant. And of course, the Courtney directors taking part today will be able to share their experience of traffic disruption over the past period of time. Staff, if you would like to carry on, Chris and John.
Thank you. Chris, I believe you're going to speak on this.
Yeah, thanks, John. So while the focus today is on finalizing the design build project scope, we wanted to provide the commission with an update on progress on the design bid build scope through the town. So this piece is following a similar timeline as John highlighted earlier, but has a very different project delivery method. And just very briefly as a bit of a refresher, because these terms are being thrown around quite a bit today. So design build it packages the design and the construction under a single competitive process. So it's a collaboration between a design company and a build construction company. And they there's opportunities there to start construction before they've finished design. So it has its own set of advantages. The design bid build, which is the way we're delivering through the town. The CBRD hires an engineer. We work with them to develop 100% design, and then we take that out for tender, get a lump sum price for that work, and then it's built by a company who's only building our design. And so it was chosen. The DBB design bid build was chosen for the town because it provides more opportunities for collaboration between the CBRD and the town during the design process, because we're very much in control of that process. We don't have building crews already starting work while we're hammering out the details. So yeah, just a quick little refresher on the distinction there. So the alignment will now that we've switched from tunneling under Comox Hill to cut and cover, the extent of the design bid build project has thereby increased. Because the HGV component was forecast to be a part of that design build project. So now the extent of this design bid build project will go from the KFN Comox, the town of Comox border on the Comox Hill, all the way to the, so from west to east, all the way to Torrance. And so that last photo of John's there showed the detailed alignment of the Comox Hill, so up Comox Road, past the Providence site, a right on Rodello, and then following Beaufort all the way down to Stewart. So kind of avoiding the most dense parts of downtown by cutting just below it, but then obviously passing immediately by the town hall and both entries to the Marina Park. So definitely some very close collaboration required there with the town of Comox staff, with the downtown BIA, and all other stakeholders to ensure that impacts to that area are minimized. And then up Stewart along Balmoral to Torrance. And just want to flag here, as John will later on a subsequent slide, that there had been a plan or a thought that the laydown area for the pre-assembled pipe that would be then drawn through Lazo Hill for the HDD section would actually lay down along Balmoral all the way to the golf course and potentially into the golf course. But as John will highlight, that's our plans have changed. We've been able to flip that lay down to the other end of the pipe to avoid that amplifying the impact to the town of Comox.
Chris, do you want to clarify what all the bubbles are, just so we don't think that Comox has become a ballooning center?
You know what, Chair, I'm not exactly sure what those bubbles are, but they aren't related to this project.
CAO Dyson has suggested that it may be all your favorite restaurants. So we know that Comox is full of culinary delights, but I guess that'll remain a mystery for now.
Yeah, apologies for that. Yeah, just finally on this one, so McElhaney has been hired by a competitive process to be the design engineers, and they're initially focusing on the preliminary design of the section across Comox Hill, just because that was a recent change. We had previously done a preliminary design, from Rodello over to Torrance. So they're focusing on completing that through to the west boundary of the town. And then that will feed into the ongoing negotiations with the town staff on the final scope for the project, which will then be embedded in the project agreement between the CVRD and the town of Comox, and then brought before town council and the Sewage Commission at some point this spring. So that's all I have for you.
We do have a question, Chris,
Sure.
from Director McGowan, who I don't think I acknowledged was on the line before. Director McGowan, over to you.
Hi, this is, one of my first meetings, so this may have been covered in the past, but I'm just curious what the impact of cut and cover through that much of town would, like what impact that would have on the longevity and condition of our roads long term.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and obviously it's been a significant concern and articulated very well by the town staff as well as the elected officials. So that's I mentioned briefly the negotiations and the aiming towards that project agreement, and so definitely inherent to that is acknowledgement of the significant impact to the town, to first of all to residents and businesses during the construction project, but even after the presence of the pipe in the road, will be some form of constraining presence. Obviously the town won't be able to run a pipe, in that exact location, and it will be a big pipe. So starting early in the process, we worked with the town staff to establish guiding principles. For example, running the pipe parallel to property lines, keeping to one side of the road as much as possible, and then wherever the pipeline pipe prism would cross the center line, repaving the entire width of the roadway. Where we can stay within one side of the road, repaving right to the center line, so you don't have two new seams in the asphalt. So that the one new seam would then be underneath the yellow line, and therefore not leading to degradation of the roadways. We're also following similar guiding principles for many other aspects that are geared towards ensuring that basically we leave the town roads and infrastructure in better condition than when we started.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add one other component for Commissioner McGowan, and that is working with town staff to see what opportunities there are to upgrade existing infrastructure in the streets, so that you won't be having to go back in the next couple of years to replace drain, sewer, or water lines that might be coming towards the end of the life. So we're looking at every opportunity to work with the town and deliver a project that won't require disturbance in the near future, which is an added benefit to the streetscape.
Thanks, CEO Dyson, and Chris and John, if you'd like to carry on.
Yeah, great, thanks. Back over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So moving on to our second hill on the project, the more interesting hill, being Lazo Hill. This slide simply demonstrates that no less than 5 routes were considered for HDD at Lazo Hill. All of these are actually considerably longer than the optimized final alignment, which you'll see shortly. And in fact, there's actually early consideration of an even longer alignment than these shown here. Though not shown here on this slide, HDD under Lazo Marsh was also a consideration. Early in the design as well, steel pipe was contemplated as an option due to these long alignments. So some early considerations. But before continuing, we'd like to just refresh everyone as to what HDD actually entails. So we have these illustrations that describe the 3 main phases of installation. So I'll just run through it very quickly here. So first off, a small tunnel is drilled from the start point to the end point. Okay, and it's guided all the way by the controller on the drill rig using specialized controls and sensors, so they know where they're going all the time and have a very high degree of precision. Second, the tunnel then the starter tunnel gets widened by pulling what we call reamers of back and forth, and you do it with multiple passes with increasing diameter each time to make the tunnel widened. And while this is going on, a slurry mixture, bentonitic, like a clay slurry, is pumped in, and it keeps the tunnel stabilized, keeps it from collapsing. And then, meanwhile, while all this is going on the surface, at one end of the tunnel, we have the HDPE pipe sections are laid out, and then they're fused together, welded together, butt end to butt end, and then they are outside of the tunnel. This large section of pipe is pressure tested, filled with water, pressure tested, make sure there's no leaks. And then the third step is to ultimately pull the whole string of assembled pipe through this slurry-filled tunnel from one end to the other. And then once in place, the pipe is pressure tested again to be sure that there's no issue there. And then the excess slurry is recovered, recycled, and that which remains eventually solidifies in the annular space around the pipe, so you get this solid mass through the whole tunnel without voids. So that's HDD 101 sort of thing. So back to Lazo Hill. So the assessment is now complete on the Lazo Hill HDD option, and ultimately we ended up with a modified version of the LWMP configuration and using HDPE pipe instead of steel. Biggest takeaway here is that after much analysis, we've been able to shift to gravity sewer instead of pressurized flow through this area. So this is a very good news story. It provides a great deal of comfort with regards to the aquifer that the line's actually sitting above. So when I say comfort, I mean that a very thick-walled, robust pipe, I'm talking 3-inch thick walls, a pipe that's designed to be pressurized will actually only have atmospheric pressure inside, so no pressure. So in the extremely rare case of a leak, it wouldn't even be a case of having a jet of effluent spraying out of the pipe. It wouldn't be like that at all. It'd be more of a gentle weeping sort of situation. As well, the choice of HDPE through the hill over steel means there's a reduced risk of erosion, corrosion, and seismic damage. It's a big plastic flexible pipe ultimately, so it can move. And also noteworthy is that the HDPE pipe is, as I mentioned, pressure tested both before and after installation. So there's just that extra layer of comfort and security around that. So what we have here is actually the final HDD alignment through Lazo Hill. And you can see there's a lot of small red X's. Those are indicating the locations of deep and also some shallow water wells. So the design team that we have on board, the owner's engineer team from HDR and their specialist sub McMillan Jacobs, they were able to find a route that maximized the offset to wells. So he tried to get as far from them as you could, and also minimize crossing under structures and also minimize property impact. So it's kind of a best fit. So a few things to note here is that we had significant analysis performed by our hydrogeological experts at GW Solutions, and they estimated that in again a very, very rare event of seepage, the travel time to most of the wells in proximity to this line is in exceedance of 500 days. There is a minimum 20-meter offset from all deep groundwater wells. And only two wells come close to this distance, like 20, 21 sort of thing, 22. And they're under consideration actually for connection to the community water system, just to provide that extra, reassurance to those landowners. The laydown for the pipe is now through the, what you'll see on a later slide, it's through the plant site versus previous thoughts that it could be I'll run along Balmoral Avenue downtown, but it's going to be on the other end now. So that's a good news story as well. The alignment of the pipe from earlier versions was shifted at the east end to the unopened right-of-way off Moreland Road. And the other thing I want to mention is surface settlement, which is something that sometimes happens in these situations. Surface settlement of up to 25 millimeters is possible. It's not a given, but it's possible over the alignment. So more detailed analysis and consideration of monitoring measures will take place as part of the project, just to get comfort around that as well. So with this alignment, statutory right-of-way negotiations are well underway, and our property agent is working actively to secure the consent agreements. So, yep.
And we do have a question from Director Hamir representing Area B. Director Hamir.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this map. So just a couple of comments. I noted in the report that the alignment was specifically showing that there wouldn't be interference with deep wells. But I just want to confirm the reason that shallow wells were omitted from that is that because the engineers don't feel that the depth of this pipe would interfere with a shallow well?
Short answer, I think yes, but I think I'll defer to Chris on that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah, that's correct, Director. That in situations where wells, shallow wells, if shallow wells are within that 20-meter zone of the pipe horizontally, looking down plan view like we are on this map, and yet they're many meters, they terminate many meters above the pipe. Gravity takes hold, and water, as John will show in the next slide, if in that extremely unlikely event that a leak were to occur, wastewater would travel down and not up. So that's really the message there.
Sure. And I'm not concerned about, any kind of seepage that way, but more on the interruption to the hydrology. Like, would this pipe affect people's quantity of water that they're currently getting from their shallow wells?
Right. So, I guess the short answer is that, like John mentioned, GW has done extensive work in this area, kind of examining, assessing the drilling logs from as many of the wells drilled in this area as were available to them. And they use that information to then develop a 3D model of the peninsula, of this part of the Cape, or of the peninsula. And we have a very good grasp on the different strata and ground layers in this area. Additionally, we've installed continuous monitoring equipment on 9 wells that are kind of spatially distributed along this alignment, and we've started collecting data to establish a baseline pre-construction. And that's not just for water quality, because as you mentioned, there are concerns about water quantity as well. And so that data will track, in addition to tracking key quality parameters, we'll also be tracking the level of groundwater in those wells to allow us to monitor for impacts to water quantity post-construction. So I think most of this area does have like a bit of a confined shallow aquifer. Mm-hmm. So some of these kind of these wells, not just on the eastern edge, but scattered throughout, are drawing from a shallow area, where there's water that's suspended above the quadricentennial aquifer, and those are the shallow ones that you asked about before. I think we're well below that, but the one location, towards the end or the east end, as we come kind of closer to the surface, we're monitoring that very carefully, assessing that very carefully, because we will be coming up and through that layer of impermeable ground that upper aquifer is suspended on. And so we've worked closely with HDR and their sub, McMillan Jacobs, that John mentioned, to ensure that shallow aquifer is not impacted. And as John mentioned, the bentonite slurry that's used to lubricate the drilling process it's quite a very, very low viscosity clay mixture that is used to lubricate, but also to remove the spoils. So as think back to that graphic that John showed of the reading passed back and forth, as the material is being removed, it's actually removed from the hole by that bentonite slurry. So it's pumped in and out of the hole and then filtered at the surface through some processing equipment. The sand and gravel is removed and that material is put back in. Well, as that material is and it's also holding open the hole, and it's seeping into the ground immediately around it and then hardening. So by the end of that installation, you've actually got this thick kind of clay layer that lines that hole and should prevent. And then once that pipe is drawn in, the annulus around it is also surrounded by the bentonite. So in fact, at the end of the day, that pipe channel will actually be less permeable than the surrounding ground area. So all that to say, we're pretty confident that we won't be impacting groundwater quantity in the area.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. And I'm sure residents, I mean, that was noted. I'm just wondering, the pipes that, or the wells that are going in to monitor this, are they currently being drilled? Because I've just gotten some emails from residents who are wondering what's going on. And are those monitoring wells in already, or are they being put in currently?
Maybe I'll ask Zoe to speak to the geotech program that we have underway.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So the monitoring wells is actually equipment within residential properties, actual wells. So we weren't drilling new monitoring wells. The work that's been happening right now is a number of geotechnical boreholes just to kind of fill in the gaps on kind of the ground conditions in that area. So we had done some previously, and now we're just kind of, because we've optimized this alignment, there's a few spots where we just want to get a bit more ground information. So it's not the monitoring wells, it's just geotech work.
Okay, great. I have one more question, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Chair, thanks. And just a question on the subsidence. I noted there, I mean, it's in the millimeters that was noted in the report, but I'm not quite sure, like from the map, if we are still going under any like houses. It looks like potentially one, maybe, or two. And would that level of subsidence have an impact on a foundation, for example, of a house?
Sure, I can speak to this one, John. Yes, so there are actually 4 homes that are either wholly or partly over top of this alignment. So as John highlighted, our properties agent is working to secure consent agreements from the properties in this area, and part of the reason for that, so that's a step prior to the SRW negotiation, and that will allow us to enter into those properties, with lots of advance notice, to undertake a pre-construction surveys. So there will be monitoring in place. So that 25 millimeters that John mentioned is an upper kind of end to that potential settlement. In fact, we will be working with the contractors to undertake mitigation measures to try and reduce the likelihood of that occurring. But in the event that it does, we will have done that pre-construction survey so that we've got a very good sense of the pre-existing condition of these homes and structures, and then a post-construction survey so that there's a lot of clarity about exactly what the impacts of this project would be, and then language within that SRW agreement, which clearly puts the onus on the CDRD to make good on any impacts should they occur.
Okay, great. I think that will give folks a bit more assurance. Are you talking about lay down in this section or in your next?
It's coming up.
Okay, I'll wait for that then. Thanks.
I'll note, directors, that we've got about 20 minutes left. We may not be able to deal with the last 2 items on the agenda, but we will carry on with this very important section.
Thank you.
Chris and John.
Thank you. So this slide is presented just for some further clarity. This figure illustrates the extremely unlikely event of a leak happening. And in this case, we're looking at a leak happening 20 meters horizontally from a deep well. So as you can see in the figure, through the unsaturated soil, the fluid, the effluent from the pipe, if there were a leak, assisted by percolating rainwater, it travels vertically, so straight down. And the average distance above the aquifer is about 10 meters. So for it to travel that 10 meters vertically, it's expected to be about 70 days to get down to the aquifer level. So once the effluent reaches the saturated zone, it actually starts to travel laterally, kind of goes with the flow. And so for it to actually meander its way over to the well, it's expected to take somewhere between 250 to 500 additional days. So for 20 meters, a conservative estimate of the total travel time when you consider the vertical, the 70 meters or 70 days vertical, and then the horizontal travel time, it's about 320 to 570 days. That's for a 20 meter travel distance. For 40 meters, it's quite significantly over 500 days. You'll also notice on the figure, my laser pointer again, the effluent here, you'll see it near the hypothetical leak. It's quite dark, and then it gradually lightens up as it gets closer to the well screen here. So this actually illustrates that the processes are happening: filtration, chemical, biological, as the effluent travels through the soil. And these processes, to a degree, actually serve to treat the water. Not to say that it purifies it, but it does. The water certainly gets cleaner as it travels through the medium. Any questions on that?
I'll ask a question while we're, Director Grant, I attended both of the Zoom consultations with Laszlo residents, and I want to commend staff for the excellent job done in those presentations. But it seemed to me that there was a lot of uncertainty around why the acoustic leak detection process was only being conducted once per year. The rationale given was that given the rate of travel to when a well might be contaminated, that was adequate, more than adequate to detect and respond. But it seemed to leave a lot of the questioners unsatisfied. And I just wonder, I didn't hear any explanation of why we wouldn't do that acoustic leak detection more often.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So I guess as John has highlighted here, there's this particular snapshot here is assuming that a leak were to occur at the closest point to the closest well, and even in that situation, we're looking at almost a minimum travel time of a year, potentially quite a bit more than that. So one of the implications, we didn't get into this so much detail here. We try to keep it at a high level, but one of the implications of the shift to the gravity flow through this area is that it does make it more challenging to undertake a acoustic leak detection. So acoustic leak detection requires a pressurized pipe. So in order to undertake the acoustic leak detection of this section, HDR has come up with a solution of actually installing a valve that wouldn't otherwise be installed at the treatment plant that would, during an inspection, would be kind of throttled, like almost closed, to allow the wastewater to back up in this pipe up to the torrents end of the HDD section in order to provide that pressure in the pipe. And then the smart ball would be inserted and allowed to flow through this section. And so that pressure is required because it's what that smart ball is doing is it's listening for the hissing sound of a leak. Obviously, if it's open flow in the pipe, or if it's closed flow but there's not enough pressure, it wouldn't be generating a sound. So it is more operationally difficult it will be more operationally difficult to undertake the acoustic inspection, and then obviously there's the not insignificant cost And, there's the reality that we're committing to undertake this, indefinitely. So, from our perspective, this commitment to undertake it on an annual basis is supported by the study materials. And, I guess it's worth noting that, at the time of that virtual open house, the memo that's now attached to this report was not yet public. And so we're hoping that now that it is publicly available and that the residents are able to read it, that there is some additional reassurance about what we were able to provide with our answers during the session.
Okay, thanks for that. Director Grant, did you have a question? Fair enough. I don't see any other questions right now. So Chris and John, you can carry on, please.
Okay, thank you. So we're just going to talk briefly about the goings on at the very east end of the project now, up by Moreland and the plant. So HDD was actually eliminated as an option for crossing the marsh due to the presence of artesian groundwater conditions. So it's proposed to be a cut and cover through the marsh area. The blue line on a drawing shows the laydown for the HDD pipe string, which actually it follows the cut and cover, or the anticipated cut and cover alignment through the marsh right now. So as before, I'd mentioned there was thought to have it laid down on the other end of the pipe, or the other end of the HDD section through downtown and on Balmoral. Now it's on the other end and should be far less disturbing for everyone. The final assessment of the alignment at the east end is still ongoing. I'm talking about the cut and cover. The potential environmental impact is being reviewed with avoidance of habitat being the prime consideration. And we're also looking at options to reduce the depth of the pipe at the plant. So those are being evaluated and trying to minimize the extent of trenching through the hillside east of the marsh rather. These are things that are being looked at right now to finalize that alignment. In terms of regulatory approval, a Crown land tenure application has been filed, so that's moving forward. I'd mentioned earlier one of two odor control structures. One's at Comox Hill. The other potential location is approximately here. I'm right. Yeah, somewhere around there. So this is still under review. Again, there could be a small sort of a kiosk structure there, or upon further analysis, the foul air may actually get pushed back to the plant and be treated on site there. So still being reviewed. So two open houses were held recently. Actually, before I speak about that, any questions on the east end here? Okay.
There don't appear to be. Carry on, please.
Oh, sorry.
We've got, Director Grant.
Just had one quick question. You make mention of Barron Road, and having lived here for 57 years, I've never heard of it. I looked it up on Google Maps and it didn't show up, so I don't know where it is.
The whereabouts of Barron Road?
Apparently no one else knows where it is.
I can speak to that. So Barron Road is just where the intersection of the orange and the blue line. So it's the unopened road right of way at that location. So it actually comes off of Moreland, and I don't think it goes all the way through to Lazo, but anyway, runs west from Moreland right there. So it's currently unopened. So we're proposing to establish our HED location at that spot. So that's where Barron Road is.
Thanks, and we have Director Hamir.
Thanks, Chair. And so I don't know if this is the appropriate point to ask about the laydown area for the HDD, or if you're going to speak to it later.
No.
Is it in this section that there will be the laydown?
Yeah.
So go ahead, John.
Yeah, the blue line here actually represents the planned laydown area.
Okay. Is it on? It stays on a road, or is it going over any properties?
Sure, I can speak to that. So the concept is that laydown will follow the precise alignment of the cut and cover section of force main from the end of the HDD on Barron Road to the plant, and then from the plant it would then go out, as it's shown there, out the entry driveway and then down Brent Road and terminate just at that beach access. So the only potential private property would be one that we're already negotiating with for the SRW for the permanent location of the pipe.
Anything further, Director Hamir?
Sorry, I think that answers it. Thanks.
Thanks. And we have Director Swift.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this would be an appropriate thing for the marsh, but would it be an opportunity to have an amenity such as a boardwalk built during that cut and cover process?
Yeah, it's interesting that you would bring that up, because that was one of our first thoughts as well, that we were thinking of, maybe there's some, exactly, potential for amenity or walking trail. So we did reach out to CBRD Parks, who also have a representative on the Lazo Marsh Management Committee. And there was zero interest in the concept, which surprised us a bit, but that's the case. So they didn't see any value in adding a connection at that point. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Do we have any final slides?
Yes, we have 6 more, I believe.
Okay, please carry on.
Okay, I'm going to turn it. So 2 open houses were held recently for Lazo residents, and I'm going to turn it over to Christiane Weil now just to speak about these.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. I know we're really pinched for time, so I'm going to move through this quickly. As John mentioned, we had 2 open houses on the February 2nd and February 3rd. We offer both a lunchtime and evening webinar, and we had a good turnout with over 55 attendees over the 2 nights and about 49 questions asked and answered, most of which we were able to respond to live at the session, and the remainder we were able to follow up with directly. So we now have videos for both webinars, as well as the draft groundwater policy posted online, and all of our registered attendees received a follow-up email with links to these items. Next slide, please, John, if you don't mind. Great. Okay, so we have held 6 information sessions for this particular community, the Lazo area residents, over the last few years, and themes have remained fairly consistent over this time. So you can see these up here, and we have more of a detailed explanation in the staff report, which I'll just refer you to for more information. But what I will leave you with is the fact that leading up to these meetings, we answered over 40 inquiries, but we've had no additional follow-up questions received since the information sessions. So I think that's a testament to the great job of the CAO, the engineering team, and the consultants in responding to all of the questions with clear and straightforward messaging. So I'm happy to take any questions at this time or move through the presentation. But as I said, there are more details contained in your staff report.
Yeah, if you can carry on, please. We're very pressed for time.
Okay, and I actually miscounted. There's only a couple slides left. Sorry for that, but here we are. So now for the big reveal. The updated cost estimate. As some aspects of the project are more fleshed out than others, this can be considered a hybrid Class CD estimate. So as the design has evolved and some information has gotten clearer, the total estimate has in fact increased from 73 million to 82 million, approximately a 12% increase. As can be seen, there's an increase in the cut and cover cost and a subsequent reduction of the HDD cost due to the switch from HDD at Comox Hill, as well as a shorter alignment at Lazo Hill. A fact that is missing here is actually that the unit rate for HDD has increased by over 75%. Had it remained constant, the decrease on the HDD line item would have been actually far more dramatic, but it has gone up. An element that heavily contributed to the overall increase is the ancillary items, which include addition of a fiber optic line along the whole length, anticipated archaeological costs based on further work with Baseline and Dr. Moran, the return force main from the KFN pump station to the Courtney pump station, that green line that was on a previous drawing, and odor management needed along the alignment as well. So at this point, we also need to reiterate here that the town of Comox scope negotiations are ongoing, but this updated cost estimate includes our best estimate of where the negotiation will end up. Internal analysis by CVRD's finance has concluded that the increased budget can be accommodated within the current revenue projections for the service without exceeding the borrowing limit imposed by the AAP completed last July. So should the commission approve the scope revisions, these updated costs will be incorporated into the proposed financial plan, which will be presented next week at the February 22nd meeting. So questions?
Thank you. Carry on.
Okay, very good. Last slide.
Yeah, I got it.
So updated timeline. Oh, did we have a question?
No, carry on, and then we'll take the question.
Very good. Okay, so the timeline here, the intent is to have the system complete, commissioned, and operational in 2024. So schedule-wise, here's how we see the project progressing for the two different contracts, the delivery methods. A line here on the design build portion that may not have made it into the report is that the timing for the agreement between CVRD and the town is anticipated in April, hopefully sooner, but around there. For the design build scope, we're currently in the RFQ phase, so request for qualifications, and we expect to have our short list of proponents near the end of this month, and then that will follow on into the RFP process, and that is anticipated to be released at the end of March for that phase of the procurement. So that's all I have with regards to the timeline. So
thanks, John. Director Moran, 30-second question.
The contingency amount, what percentage is that? I'm curious, and how that compares to like the water treatment plant as an example. And is that a usual contingency, or because I believe we didn't require our contingency with the last project, so I'm curious about that cost.
Maybe I'll just answer that briefly. So this contingency, at this stage in the process is in line with what we were using for the water treatment project. And the contingency that you're most freshest in your mind for the water treatment project was actually a kind of different level of contingency that was kind of carried through construction. So at this point, well in advance of the actual procurement process, and at this kind of relatively low level of design, it's appropriate to have a 35 or 40% contingency. Whereas when we get through to post procurement and into construction, we're on the order of more like 5%, and that's roughly what we carried for the water treatment project was that 5% or $5 million contingency.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Director Moran. Directors, we are at the end of our allotted time, and because this is a very important issue and all the staff work that is represented in it, I don't want to short circuit any further opportunity for questions or dialogue. So I will ask for a motion at this time that we refer the rest of this agenda to next week's meeting of the Sewage Commission on February 22nd.
So moved.
Moved by Grant, seconded by Cole Hamilton. Is there anyone opposed? That is carried unanimously. And thank you very much, directors, for your diligence, and to staff for all the work involved today. The meeting is now adjourned. Oh, sorry. Say that again. Oh, we need a motion to terminate. Yes. Moved by Grant, seconded. Swift. Any opposed? Carried. The motion, the meeting is terminated. Thank you.